Hey,
Hey, how's it going, man?
good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Just chilling here on a Monday night, just having some. I'm not even having any beers or anything. I'm just chilling.
So let's talk cinema.
Yeah, let's talk cinema. So I was actually watching um Joel Haver did a promo years ago. And it was for his film Island. I was watching it. It was like, and it's like this rip on. I don't know if you've ever seen it, the old classic, that John Cassavetes interview, "The Television Sucks." Have you seen that?
Hmm.
You've seen it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I always thought that was funny, and then I like was on his Vimeo page because I don't know how I got lost through it today, but then I was just thinking about that, and I was just like, that really captured me. That was like the first thing that I remember seeing of Joel's and being like, okay, this is like totally my vibe.
Yeah, that's Island was how I first found Joel as well. It was that he made like a Reddit post about the trailer to Island, and I think he was selling views of the movie for like $5 where people could just
Hmm.
watch it on Vimeo. And I watched the trailer and I thought it looked interesting and good, and I took the plunge, and I mostly took the plunge ironically because people weren't really responding to it on our filmmakers or whatever. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't really getting much love there, but it
No.
looked good to me. So I mean, the rest is history. I'm glad I watched that movie. I'm glad I gained that friend, and then that friend turned into more friends, and it just, blossomed and blossomed, to the point that, we're all just we're cooking, we're all making
Yeah.
our stuff.
Yeah, I just it's just kinda crazy. I was just thinking about how far we've come since that. Like, that
Yeah.
moment felt, like, not too long ago, and then I, like, was like, "Holy shit, that was from 2019. That was 5 years ago." And it just, like, kinda, like, hit me this weird moment of, like, all the stuff that I consider to be recent history is like almost ancient history in my mind now. Like if you really look through it, it's like it before you know it, some of the stuff's gonna be 10 years old, and we're gonna be like, oh, Island, like I think that's gonna be something that's interesting about the space, the folk filmmaking, truly independent, whatever you want to call it, space, is like realizing that these films 10 years on are going to be, maybe some of them will even be considered, independent classics of some sort. I just think it's gonna be an interesting time to see these films kinda age gracefully.
Yeah, I mean, to borrow a Norm Macdonald saying, I'm an old chunk of coal. So like I went through that with Shredder. And so Shredder and then making Strummer 10 years later. And that feeling was interesting, like, because I got started pretty early on. You guys were
Yeah.
still in diapers and whatnot when I was making Shredder, it feels like. And I always felt like a little bit like the old guy at the table in a certain sense because of that. Because like I was hitting my like 10-year mark, um
Anniversary.
right around the time when we were like becoming friends and all that. So it's interesting. Time flies,
Yeah,
man.
it is interesting because I was like, you know, it's funny because I marked it with the release of Chlorine was in 2020, and but it was made in 2019, and then now the new one's coming out. Chlorine Kills is coming out 2024, and so it's basically been 5 years on. And I was just like, how crazy has the space shifted? Because I was like, I really felt like for me, when Chlorine came out, it was like that was like kind of like the start of all of us. Like me and you and Joel had already kind of connected, I think, before that. But like that was like once Chlorine came out, and then you were dropping some films, and Joel was dropping films. That's kind of like when all of us as a collective sort of found each other and like found that sort of group of random people that kind of were making films. And it's just kind of weird to think that like nearly like half a decade later, it's like now I'm dropping a new film that's a sequel to the film that kind of started some connections, and now I'm like, I can't even imagine where things are gonna go 5 years on. You know?
Mhm. And we're doing Pure Cinema 3, and who knows, there
Yeah.
could be Pure Cinema 4 and 5 and 6, like, as things go on, this could be this kind of time capsule that you keep revisiting. I
Well, and it was
watched,
funny.
uh I watched
You were
Pure
saying?
Cinema 1 the other night,
Yeah.
to just kinda refresh and, like, see what it was, like, compared to what my memory of it, 'cause I liked it at the time, but and in my mind, it was like in my mind, it was this very polished piece, and when I revisited it, it was interesting how, like, it has this immediacy that I had kind of forgotten about it, where it isn't like a perfect, uh, interview movie, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's a little jagged, and it needs to be that way, and that's a quality that I actually like about it that I had forgotten that it had. Um,
Yeah.
but the thing that I loved about it was, like, it was, um it was you, and you could feel the sense of you wanting to, um like, be you were motivated by Joel's decision, and, like, you carried that with you. It was like a baton was passed immediately, and I love that aspect of it. And, like, when I think back to that first year of, like, making a movie instead of watching the Oscars, I remember that night thinking, like, man, should I do one too? Like, should I just, like, because Dan's doing one, Joel's doing one, should I do one as well? I think I just wasn't in the mood that night, but, like, that kind of baton passing and the constant baton passing, I think that's one aspect of what we all do and do for each other that I think, gets lost unless there's a document of that specifically. And Pure Cinema is a document of what that kind of feels like, where we're just passing these batons, like, all the time, where, like, you'll make something and then that'll give me an idea for something, or I'll do something and that'll fuel something with you, where we're just constantly almost like an improv yes and we're just passing batons back and forth, like, all the time. And so I think that was a really cool illustration of that with Pure Cinema.
Well, and I think it was weird because, like, for a film that, like, has taken up such a small percentage of my time filming, it weirdly I honestly feel like Pure Cinema might be the most one of my most lasting pieces. Like, I hear people talk about it pretty, like, even though it's been almost, 3, 4 years since I made that, I still hear people talk about it, even if it's in, like, a joking context or a meme context. And I do think that there's something interesting about the how quick how, like, you can make something so quick and can have sort of a texture to it that, like, just, like, colors the walls in a certain way and makes them a certain texture, and you're not really going to, like, lose that for a while. And I don't know, I think there was something interesting about it, and I feel like there's other pieces I've done, like, I think my film Winner is kind of like trying to recapture a little bit of that Pure Cinema essence, I would say, in some way. But yeah, I don't know, it was an interesting piece to make, and I remember just being like, when I saw Joel was making a feature, I like it was like something in my brain immediately was just like, "Oh my gosh, I gotta do this right now." Because, like, if I don't, I'm gonna regret it. So it was just
Yeah.
like an immediate, like, sort of, I gotta do it, and then I did it, and then, little did I know it was gonna become such a big thing. Like, I thought it might have been like that year, and then I didn't really think it was gonna be like a thing we would do like every year. And then once Joel was like, "Hey, we're gonna do this contest and all the stuff," um, yeah, it was kind of a surreal experience.
Yeah, it has a great shorthand to it, Pure Cinema. And,
Yeah.
like, I think that's, like, the people that don't like it, the couple people that, like, are like, "What the fuck is this?" I think they're missing out on, like, the happiness, like, that you could get from watching something like that. Like, I don't know why sometimes someone's happiness will make somebody else so angry, but that does
Yeah.
happen a lot when you're making movies. Like, you'll be so happy about something you've created, and you just kind of implicitly, like, assume that, like, oh, other people when they interact with it, they're gonna feel that same energy or it's gonna rub off on them. and then you'll find like it does the exact opposite for just a certain segment of the population. Your
Yeah.
joy and your exuberance just becomes you know, kind of their worst nightmare, and it just brings up either insecurities or inadequacies, or I'm not doing something, or I
Yeah.
could be doing something and it would be better than this, or feelings of
Yeah.
whatever. It just confronts people. I feel like art can confront people in that way, especially art
Well,
made by people that you don't feel that different from that, like, "Oh,
well,
I could be doing this." It's like
eh,
it's the classic art thing of, "I could paint that." And it's like, "Well, you didn't paint that, and maybe you could
well,
paint that, and
and
go for it."
there was a review on the original film on Letterboxd. I don't know if you've seen the thread, but like it like had like 27 like full paragraph responses. And everyone's debating whether or not this was a movie or not. And I'm like, we've debated this movie more than other movies that you would consider movies. And if
Yeah, yeah,
just by the mere fact that you were discussing it that long, that warrants it as being a movie in my mind. Like if you're willing to pour into paragraphs and paragraphs about why it's not cinema, it can't be cinema. It's like that it almost like breathes life into it being cinema just by that mere fact, you
yeah.
know?
It's like the people who hate the Star Wars prequels, but they will do 9-hour or 12-hour reviews of, well, one of the, even just Phantom Menace or something like that. And it's like, if you spend more time saying that something is bad than you even spent watching the thing, it has to be good. There's something there
Yeah.
to it. It's like the old joke of like the guy who goes into the woods and he tries to shoot the bear and the bear flips him around, rapes him in the ass, and the bear eventually after like 3 or 4 times is like, "Something tells me you don't come here just to hunt," you know? If you're spending that much time allegedly hating. Have you not heard that joke before?
I've heard that joke. I've heard that joke
Okay.
before.
Yeah. If you're spending that much time hating on a movie, there's some love there, and that's worth
Yeah.
exploring at some point. And I think that's hard for some people. It's like it I think loving art, there's a sexuality to it. There's like it's like, what does this say about me that I'm into this? And so you're like, well,
Yeah.
I didn't like it, like it brings up
Yeah.
really complicated things for people. I think liking or not liking art or whatever. I've definitely had experiences when I was much younger where like I liked a movie, but then everybody else in the room hated it, and I just kind of like morphed
Yeah.
my experience into something that more resembled their experience. And then
Yep.
later on, years later, I was like, "No, fuck them. I was totally right," when I, like, rewatch it or
Yeah.
something on my own.
I
Um,
remember sitting with my friends. We had just saw the film Drive. And that was like a seminal film for all of us. Like it was like a bunch of dude bros like watching it. And then the following year he came out with a film called Only God Forgives. And Only God Forgives is like the anti-drive of like it's like emasculates the main character like to an extent that is like so the opposite of Drive, and all of my friends just sat there and they were, like, appalled. They hated it, and I was like, "That was pretty good." And I remember just being, like, yelled at the whole night.
yeah. Yeah,
Like,
that's interesting. I,
you
that was kind of my experience a little bit with Phantom Menace, and, I loved it, like, when I was a kid, and I loved it, like, I saw it, like, 1 or 2 times, and I was really into it, and I was kind of at the age where, like, there were kids that, had older brothers, and so the older brothers were talking shit on it, and the younger brothers would eventually kind of copy that because it would make them feel a little older and a little cooler. And so I watched the tides turn on that movie, and the kid response start to resemble the teen response or the college response or whatever. And it made me be like, well, yeah, I guess it was kind of dopey or kind of stupid or whatever. And like, in retrospect, as a grown man, all the dopey aspects are totally intentional and all the goofy aspects are totally intentional. And even things that like on like a subtle nuance level feel like wrong notes, like the more I explore them and the more I look at them in the prequels, like I just end up loving them more and more and feeling like they add like a rich energy to it that you wouldn't have it any other way. um I think like I have like a little bit of a fan theory on pure cinema that I just want to lay out to you real quick if that's all right.
Yeah, go for it.
So this isn't like, it's not like a traditional fan theory of like, oh, I have some weird read on it. It's almost like a vision for pure cinema. I see pure cinema as mirroring the prequels in a certain way. And hear me out.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
pure cinema 1, Phantom Menace is kind of like it's a prologue. It's we're getting to know these characters, but everything doesn't really matter that much. I've heard there's a great writer, Mike Klimo, who writes about the prequels. He's the one that came up with like ring theory and as it
Yep.
pertains to it. Um, and he talks about the Phantom Menace as a prologue and how it mirrors what a prologue should be. The prologue establishes tones and people, but like it doesn't matter as much as the actual beginning of the story, which one could argue is the second film and onward. It's just kind of like setting things up a little bit. And I think pure cinema is kind of like a prologue. It's like here's some ideas that of what this series could be, and let's just get these down onto paper or onto celluloid a little bit, and that's going to be the energy. So that's pure cinema 1. Now, in Pure Cinema 1, you talk about not liking Attack of the Clones and feeling like it's too much and it's like you still aren't really, fully on board with that one. Pure Cinema 2 is just as insane a concept and overlong and crazy as Attack of the Clones. So that Pure Cinema 2 is your Attack of the Clones. And part of my goal with Pure Cinema 3 is, personally, to me, Revenge of the Sith, that's my favorite Star Wars movie.
Yeah,
And so
it's great.
I'm trying to make sure that this movie is the best pure cinema movie yet. Now, I'm
The
fully
cream of the crop.
prepared. Yeah, I'm fully prepared for the vast majority of watchers to prefer pure cinema 4, 5, and 6 and be more
Yes.
on board with those. Now, those will please the masses, maybe. But me personally, I'm trying to make sure Pure Cinema 3 is the shit. That's my,
That's
I don't even know if I can call it a fan theory, but that's what I propose here. And I want to know how you
you've
feel.
grafted the Star Wars ethos on top of. Yeah, actually, once you were saying it, I was like, I was like thinking about Pure Cinema too, and I was like, he's right. I know where he's going with this.
Yeah.
No, but like, I mean, again, and it was funny because Pure Cinema 2 was sort of like a meme joke
Hmm.
thing. Like it was literally like I made Pure Cinema, and then we had a bunch of people like who were just hating on like the idea of us making a movie, and I was like, wouldn't it be funny if we just turned a literal live stream into a movie and just like treated it like a movie? And it's funny because it's like that film has more views literally because it's named Pure Cinema 2, even though it's literally just a fucking live stream.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was funny. It was just like a little bit of troll humor, but then I think it did sort of stick in a way. But that is really hilarious.
Yeah, and I think that the series can just kind of build and build. Like we're doing, anybody watching this right now knows that we're doing something a little bit avant-garde with this one with I'm releasing my version, you're releasing your version and all that. Like I feel like each pure cinema can kind of subvert in that way. Like the second one obviously subverted as far as it just being a live stream, but
Yeah.
presented as a movie if somebody wants to interact with it as that. But basically just a live stream. I feel like each pure cinema can kind of reinvent pure cinema in a certain way.
Well, and I thought the idea of, because I had toyed with doing a Pure Cinema 3 for a while now, actually. So this kind of like randomly crept up on me, because there was part of me that was thinking like, is Pure Cinema 3 just a narrative film? Like, do we just randomly just like does it just randomly just slip into a narrative, and then the next entry is a, docu journal thing, or like where could it possibly go, and what kind of ideas could we have? I think each Pure Cinema could be a completely different expression of cinema without it necessarily, like, I don't feel like each film has to bend to any form of the previous films. It's not
I
like
agree, yeah.
stylistically, it doesn't really matter, in my opinion.
I think
I mean,
the only thing I'll interject with is that the 5th Pure Cinema has to have a huge take a huge turn that becomes ubiquitous, mirroring the, "I am your father." Like, there needs to be
yeah,
some revelation in the 5th one. That's the only thing that I suggest.
is that there's got to be some sort of big,
Yeah,
literally
somebody's
just
gotta
out
reveal
of
something
nowhere.
huge in the 5th one, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's funny just how, as filmmakers, we've made like both our own bodies of work, and now we're just randomly calling each other, and we're making it up like like, I was thinking about it. I was kind of preparing myself today in a weird way, like spiritually preparing myself to do this. I like literally went and like got all this nice food, and then I like went to this park that I go to, and I went on a walk, and then I went and I visited my dad at his grave, and I did like all this stuff, just kind of like getting myself in the correct headspace, because I knew I was going to be doing like some sort of thing that like required me to be in a good energy. And I was just thinking about how, like, our story, and like, us knowing each other, and then there was parts where we talked and we didn't talk, but I think it was overall, like, I thought it was cool to think like, hey, me and Cody are making a movie. I was thinking about that, and that got me excited.
Yeah, I was totally jazzed about it too. I didn't go through as much preparation as you did just because I woke up kinda late and I was, like, just kinda getting things together and all that, but, yeah, we've had these kind of conversations, these phone conversations in the past, and, like, now we're making that cinema in a certain way, and
Yeah,
I feel like when you're an artist, there's a way to make anything you do art, um and because we're filmmakers, there's anything we do, we can probably film and turn into something. And that's one of the
yeah,
big revelations of making the kind of smaller movies that we do is that like, what you were just describing to me, it conjured up visual images of like you going through your day in preparation, and that could have been a movie. That could have been
yeah.
Pure Cinema 2.5 or something like that. There's just no end to the amount of movies we can make. It's almost like a fractal. Like as we just delve deeper and deeper and deeper, and we'll discover more different ways that we can find a movie from,
Well, and
and
it's
that's really
funny.
exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting, and I think about, I was working on a video this week about how I'm gonna make 100 feature films. Like, that's my goal. Like, I've already set that goal for a while now. That, like, my goal is to be a part of at least 100 feature films in some different way, because I want, like, my contribution to cinema at some level to be a noticeable one. You know what I mean? Even if it's something that's not never makes the splash that like some like giant Hollywood director might make. I do want it to be something where like people will take notice and be like, "Oh my gosh, this guy made 100 projects, 100 things that were over 45 minutes or an hour or something like that." And there was clearly time and effort and love put into those frames. And whenever I add stuff to the playlist, it's like this point of pride of like being like, okay, like there's another like little, I'm chipping away at that goal. And I just feel blessed every day when I think about it, that like there are filmmakers who literally make one film and then they just disappear. I was thinking about Shane Carruth, actually, um, and just kind of the way his life has gone as of lately. And I don't know if you know anything about what happened with him and all that stuff, but,
Yeah, yeah. I just
and
learned about that a couple months ago. I had no idea of that stuff that was
yeah,
going on.
and I was just thinking about him, and I was thinking, like, just about his filmography and how, like, Shane Carruth could easily upload his films to YouTube if he wanted to, you know what I mean? If he truly wanted to,
Yeah.
but he chooses not to at some level, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a choice. At this point, it's a choice. I feel that way for a lot of different guys where I feel like greed is kind of getting in the way. It's almost like a last crusade type thing where like, you drink from the chalice and now you're just sitting in this chamber all day, every day.
Yeah.
Like it's just a weird um it's a weird thing to agree to. Once you get embroiled in bridled, what word am I looking for? Is that did I get it right?
I think you're right. I think you're
Yeah, when you get stuck in the
I
system.
think it's embroiled or something
Embroiled,
like
maybe. Okay.
yeah,
When you
maybe.
when you're entrenched, let's go with entrenched. When you're entrenched in the system, and that becomes your standard for you creating something, it's gonna be years, sometimes decades before you do it again, and I think about that in regards to Richard Kelly, who
Mhm.
I kind of, connected to pretty strongly with Donnie Darko.
Yep.
I wasn't really into Southland Tales, but I think The Box is very good. I think it's pretty underrated. Um,
Yep.
but, you talk to him in, like, an interview, and he'll be like, "Yeah, I'm working on, like, all these other things, and I've been trying to make things and all that." And it's like, yeah, everything you try and make, it never sees the light of day. I've heard of like 10 different projects of his that just never see the light of day. And it's
Ye
like, I get that you want your movies to feel big and feel important and you want to get them properly funded and all that. But at a certain point, like, y- I think the studio system probably just thinks, like, look at this fool. Look how we can kind of like get him to not create just by pure greed. Like it really is, it does come down to it. If you think you need $50 million or $20 million to like put your vision together, it's like, no, dude. If you're gonna have $20 million, put it into like property or like building, your own
Yeah.
Lucasfilms Skywalker Ranch or whatever. Like, but just you can always make a smaller movie. Always.
Well, and I think that's the thing that, like, and I don't even think small needs to be synonymous with, like, not intricate or not
Right.
time consuming or not even, like, well produced. Like, I think about Chlorine Kills, like, I'm making it right now, and it's like it's the biggest movie I've made, but it's so much smaller considering, like, what other indie filmmakers probably would have to play with, like, millions of dollars. But I think, like, the scale of it can still feel just as big of a scale as a different type of movie if you spend the correct time and effort into it. And me and you, I think, are both filmmakers that kind of play on different ends. Like, for the most part, I think a lot of our films take very short periods of time to record, but I think we both have had projects that have, like, spanned either multiple years or have spanned a decent amount of time either getting made or edited and produced. And I think,
Hmm.
like, you can have both of those. And I think, like,
Yeah.
it's just I find it funny that there are directors who, like, could greenlight themselves. They have the audience and they could literally, like, make a film folk film style, whatever how you want to call it, and they could literally have that, and they would probably clean up, you know what I mean? Like, if tomorrow, you know, Kevin Smith went out with, like, a couple, you know, A7 threes and shot a movie in a week, it probably would do pretty good if you put it on YouTube or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, I think
Hmm.
most people would be interested in that. Like, it'd be like, "Whoa, that's kinda weird." But, like, there's this weird, it's like a force field or something. It's like a thing that keeps them from wanting to, like, break down those walls.
Yeah, I wish more filmmakers kind of would play around with very consumer, consumer in quotes cameras, like how Michael Mann kind of got into that for a little bit of a time period. And like, I
Yeah.
wasn't that crazy about his experiments with that. Like, I appreciate certain aspects for sure, um, but,
It's the
that
fucking
level of
shutter speed.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, absolutely. But that
Shut
level of creativity and curiosity, I think, by the time Wes Anderson has made all of his movies, one of the things I'll kind of be like, "Man, I wish blah, blah, blah," is like, he shot, Fantastic Mr. Fox on a DSLR, because he's just taking frames, so it was the thing that made the most sense, for him to
Yeah.
use, and often wonder, like, man, imagine if Wes Anderson would make, like, a DSLR movie, like, an actual movie, um, because,
Oh, yeah.
I feel like I've shown that, like, with a DSLR, you can make almost like a Wes Anderson-y kind of, like, intricate set thing, like with Ramekin, where I found that great apartment, and I was able to use that weird wallpaper and all sorts of things, and, like, even with, like, No Shark, just, like, the framing, like, you can make what, like, a normie would call, like, a Wes Anderson-y type movie, because just they don't really have the words to put together for, like, "Oh, you just mean, like, the setting is as interesting as, like, the people and, like, the costumes are as interesting as the
Yeah.
setting, and, like, everything's balanced in that way." I would just love to see him do something that free, especially because you know how there's been this rise. I shouldn't assume, but there has been I shouldn't assume that you know it. I mean, but there's this rise of like finding accidental Wes Anderson stuff in life, where like people will
Yeah.
find like something in a Wes Anderson font or
Yep,
like a
I've seen
building
it.
that looks, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
would love to see a Wes Anderson movie where he just used pre-existing stuff, like
Oh,
finds
yeah.
locations that are real
Well
and
well,
plops down a camera in front of that, and
I
like
mean,
that's
that's just Bottle Rocket, like, you could literally just do,
exactly,
like
exactly. I love Bottle Rocket, and he hates Bottle Rocket. And
Wes
that's
Anderson is the worst judge of his own taste.
absolutely. To me, those first 3 movies, fucking I'll go 4, I'll go 5, I'll go 5 in a row. Those first
Yeah.
4 or 5 movies, unbelievable. Um,
Oh, yeah, I think, for me, it peaked with, Rushmore, but, I do
yeah,
really feel like that Bottle Rocket, Rushmore, Tenenbaums, that those run of movies
yeah. When
was
I was a
was
kid
truly
seeing
special.
when I was a kid seeing Rushmore in the theater with my mom in, like, a small little theater, I mean, there was maybe 4 or 5 people in the audience. That was one of the defining moments for me cinematically, was
Yeah.
looking up and seeing that movie and being like, "What is this?" Like, I didn't know you could do this. I wasn't getting what he was hearkening back to because I wasn't exposed to any of that. I was just, like,
Oh,
I was
yeah.
maybe, like, 12 or something, or 11.
When you
Um
don't even, like, you can't even place the references, they just feel so fresh because you're
Exactly.
so un
Similar thing with Kill Bill, actually. When I saw Kill Bill in theaters, I was like, I just became voracious as far as like, all right, what are all the movies and things that he's hearkening back to with this? I was just like kind of like pulling it apart. And it's a lot
Yeah.
easier with something like Tarantino than it is with Wes Anderson. But
Yeah.
basically, these movies where like you realize that this guy is so familiar with all this great stuff that like all the needle drops in Rushmore. I'm like, I didn't know this kind of music even existed. Like I've heard older music. I've heard 60s music, 70s music. I've heard like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, but like these very precise needle drops. And I know Scorsese was a huge influence on Wes Anderson, and he's well known for his amazing needle drops as well. But like that needle drop aspect and that like that thing where you can take a film that you fall in love with and you can unpack the influences for the rest of your life. Um, that was a key moment for me, seeing that in theaters. I remember I saw that and I saw Office Space. I'm like one of the few people in the world that saw Office Space in the fucking theater. Everybody else saw
That's
that on video cassette when like it was safe to like be like this is a good movie. I saw a matinee of that with my mom. I think we were the only 2 people in the theater probably. Just because we thought it looked good. We saw like the trailers on TV and we thought it looked funny. And so we went and
Yeah.
saw it, and nobody believed us that it was funny. We were like, "It was so good, you have to see Office Space." And they were like, "Oh, I don't know about that." People thought it was gonna be trash for some reason. Obviously
Yeah,
goes on to
I
becoming
don't know.
one of the biggest comedies ever.
Oh,
But
yeah.
those 2 movies, Rushmore and Office Space, I saw either in the same year or a year apart, and those were, like, foundational as far as, what is going on? Like, I didn't know you could make a comedy movie that intricate in 2 different directions, because I don't think Office Space and Rushmore would be typically compared, but, like, at the time, there was nothing like Office Space, and there was nothing like Rushmore, and they couldn't be further apart, and they were both kinda slept on a little bit when they first came out, and I was just obsessed with them, for sure.
Yeah, I think they're both just movies that, they kinda just stick in your brain. They just kinda stick there, and I do remember kind of seeing both of them, and I remember seeing I don't know if you ever seen another film that kind of, like, I don't know why it, like, attaches my brain in the same place. It's called Way Downtown. I don't know if you ever saw it.
Never heard of it.
Oh, I think I'm trying to remember who the director is. Oh, I cannot for the life of me remember. It's this comedy, and the basically the premise is it's like three friends, and they live in a community where their apartments are connected to the mall. So it's basically they live in these homes that are connected to the mall, and they make this bet and this wager that basically how long can they go without breathing fresh air? So they basically stay inside the whole time. They go from their apartment to the mall, they all work at the mall, and then it's
This
like
sounds incredible. How have I never heard
it's
about this?
it's a 2000s film. It's shot like it looks like it's shot on like the crappiest camera you've ever seen, but like it's great. It's fucking phenomenal. And it's like in my mind it's just up there with like Office Space.
I wanna
Like
see that really badly. I
yeah,
will
yeah,
probably
and it's
watch that tonight.
it is really good. It's really good. It's hard to find, but if you look it up, you can like find a pirate version of it somewhere. It's
Did you
like
ever
not one of those.
see, did you ever see that movie Chuck and Buck?
I have not.
That's the first, Mike White movie. He's in it and he wrote it, and, you know the camera that they shot, like, 28 Days Later with? That kind of, like, weird DV camera,
Yeah,
early DV camera?
yeah.
It's shot with one of those, and it's this, like, kind of like
That's
what later would become mumblecore.
yeah.
Um, but before that, it was just kind of like it was used in this very, poetic, ethereal way, kind of like with Julian Donkey Boy, because it was I think they used the same
Mhm.
camera for that one. But Chuck and Buck, I would definitely recommend as one of those, like,
Oh,
eye-opening, early 2000s indies. I think you'd really like
yeah.
that one.
Trying to think of other great mini DV. Have you ever seen Blonde Death?
No. What's that one?
Yeah, it's 1980s, maybe 90s. I want to say it was probably 90s. But I think it takes place in the 80s, and it's like trashy kind of. It's like all done like almost like narrated style, like sort of like Badlands. But imagine if
Mhm.
it was done like it's the trashiest movie that you've ever seen. And it's like this very transgressive. There's a
Sounds
couple
good to me.
characters are like, yeah, it's just kind of like it's a weird fucking movie, and but I fucking love it. It's but I'm pretty sure it's shot on mini DV as well. It's the only film the director ever did. I think the guy ended up dying not too long afterwards, but
Wow.
he made a movie, and then yeah, it's pretty interesting. I saw it on Vimeo a couple of years ago. Yeah, I watch a lot of just random weird things that I'm like, I don't feel anyone's ever seen.
Me too, yeah. Especially with movie-going culture becoming so homogenized and like, "Oh, we gotta see all the MCU," or, "We gotta see the new Dune," or whatever. It's like, even with television shows, I was feeling that with a certain point where, like, I didn't wanna be watching everything that everybody else was watching just because I didn't want to be influenced by everything that everybody else was being influenced by. So I would often make a conscious choice to like watch TV that nobody else was watching or movies that nobody was
Yeah.
else was watching, just because I think it keeps me like healthy as an artist. Um,
Well, it just keeps you like fresh. Like
yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah.
pulling
And it's also
from
like things get forgotten all the time. Like
well,
if you don't seek out certain movies, like then
no one
nobody's
will.
gonna know about them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird thing where, like, I do feel like there's so much media out there now, and there's so much stuff that's just, like, accessible, and there's so many options, there's so many things that just go completely unnoticed, and, like, I was thinking, like, we kinda are in the first generation of filmmakers who are being inspired by filmmakers from their generation in a weird way. Like, I was thinking about, like, I watched Island, and then I've been inspired by Island and made films that are inspired by Island, and it's like that film only came out 5 years ago, and I think that there's this weird, like, acceleration that we're going through right now, where we're accelerating the process from inspiration to creation, whereas, like, your Spielbergs, your Coppolas, your, Schraders were inspired by people who made films 20, 30 years prior to them, maybe even as close as 10 years. Now you're having filmmakers making a film, and the next year you're making a film that's a response to that. And I think that
Mhm.
that acceleration is both brought on by YouTube and the platform of just being able to post stuff, and then there's it's so easily accessible. You can like zoom through a bunch of stuff real quick, and then suddenly you have like all this new juice in you. And I think that's one thing I really like about that folk filmmaking, that truly independent, that space, is that like I'm getting new shit all the time. Like and it's giving me new ideas and giving me new thoughts. And I think like we're already seeing those films be influential on other things, whether consciously or subconsciously.
Mhm. Well, I think cinema in itself at its best is a constant dialogue and reformation about what a movie even is. And as we add to that more and more, and like not just in like experimental ways of like a live stream as a movie or whatever like that, but just tone wise in more subtle ways that we can respond to and be influenced by constantly and quickly. Um, we're finding what even independent film even is, and that's been a huge explosion over the past 5 years of like what even a movie on YouTube is, because I think a lot of people for a very specific time probably thought a YouTube movie was, oh, somebody who's famous on YouTube for doing some other videos, they're going to do like Fred the
I'm a
movie, or they're going to do like
Yeah.
some YouTube channel will have a movie and it'll be trash and it'll be terrible and it'll be unwatchable and then everybody moves on. And no,
Well,
it can be this very subtle place.
it can be a very artful thing, and it reminds me, I just watched for the first time. I'd seen the clip cut out, but I had never watched the documentary Hearts of Darkness until literally like last week. And it's that last you've seen it, right? I don't want to spoil this, right?
No, I've never seen it. I've only seen clips like you.
Okay. But I think you've seen the Francis Ford the fat girl in Ohio clip. Have you seen that? Or do you not know that?
Refresh me. It sounds so
Oh,
familiar that I'll probably remember it right away.
so
But
basically Francis Ford Coppola, after making this bombastic, overdrawn film, they interview him like 20 years later, and they're like kind of asking him about all the stuff in the documentary, and he goes, my ultimate vision for cinema is that some little fat girl from Ohio is going to be the next auteur. Like
right, yeah,
she's going to get her camera, her dad's camera, and she's going to go and film something. It's going to be a masterpiece. And all this other stuff is just a facsimile of what cinema is right now, but it could be so much more, so much personaler, more personal.
mm-hmm,
And I don't know, it was just really powerful because it's like the very final like takeaway you have after you watch this man labor out over a 3.5 hour epic.
Yeah.
his end message is like, I really hope that the the next generation makes really small personal films that don't need to do this bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
I
familiar with the clip, and I feel like he's a very self-tortured filmmaker in that, like, I think his best work, and I'm not alone in that regard, you know, Vincent Gallo says the same thing. The Rain People is, like, extraordinary and so, so small and so perfect. Have you seen The Rain People?
I have not. I
Oh
gotta see
my
it.
god, it's like dude, it's you watch The Rain People and, like, you're like, "What are you doing making Apocalypse Now if you can make this?" Like, "Bro, like, come home. Just make
I
movies here, just little tiny ones, like, you're so good."
and
You just wanna, like,
I think
shake
he's one
them.
of those he's kind of like, he's at war with himself a little bit. Like, he always
Absolutely.
wants to, like, kinda make something that's 'cause you when I watched I just actually watched Apocalypse Now for the first time too recently, and, like, I couldn't get through it. I mean, I loved it, but I fell asleep.
Yeah.
Um, and after, like because I watched, like, the extended 3-hour cut, and I was like, "This is just, like" it's like a film that's both trying to be extremely personable, but also be as grand as possible, and it's like I need it to do one or the other, you know what I mean? Like, I don't need
Yeah.
both. I don't need it to be a both this personal odyssey and then there's also this epic grand thing. I just want it to be one thing, you know? If it's gonna be epic and it's gonna be, like, make it the whole thing, you know? Make it that, like, for the whole 2 hours, you know what I mean? Make it crazy. Or make it an extremely personal war story, but, like, it kinda feels like he's at that point where he can't decide whether or not and I kinda felt like I had similar issues like, I remember seeing The Godfather and thinking, like, "Oh, it's okay." I don't know, like, I never was, like, really, like, that taken away as being, like, it as a masterpiece or anything like that, maybe that's controversial, but
No, I feel the same way. I was
I just don't
distracted with Godfather by the makeup and the performance of, Marlon Brando. I think he's much
yeah,
better in other things, and I think just even, that character and that type of character, if you watch the movie with Matthew Broderick that he did in the '90s called The Freshman, he takes another crack at that same character, and he's so much better. And if
yeah,
he was that in The Godfather, I would feel the same way about Godfather as most people. Um, but I'm with Brando on it. He needed another crack at it. He needed
yeah,
to come at it in a different genre because The Freshman's a bit funnier. Um,
yeah,
but he gets that extra swing, and man, it's like it almost feels like Revenge of the Sith, where like um, I feel like it took until Revenge of the Sith for Lucas to finally figure out exactly what a Star Wars movie actually is. Like everything
yeah,
else is just ideas. And then that third film, that final film of his, he was like, it's almost like this aha moment before death. It's like you're glimpsing the afterlife and you're also glimpsing your past life at the same time. It's like,
we
he's like, now I know what Star Wars is. And then he's gone, you know? And that I could cry just thinking about that. But that's what episode 3 is for me. It's just so he realizes what he's built and what it actually is, and he makes the perfect version of it, and
yeah,
then he's gone, and it's just so beautiful. I love that, and I love moments like that, and man,
yeah.
it's just cinema's heavy, dude.
Yeah, it is. It truly is, and
I
I
feel
feel
like
like I'm
cinema is realizations. It's very personal realizations
Oh,
m
yeah.
made concrete and made,
Well,
livable and relivable for people that are completely different from you from all over the world, like,
yeah, and it's allowing
man,
people to step into your shoes and embody something for a certain period of time without the danger of actually having to go there emotionally or physically or, anything like that, and
yeah,
it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Do you have any, final thoughts? I feel like we're hitting that time.
yeah, Well, I think pure cinema as a term is so perfect and so beautiful, and I don't know if it's necessarily something that can be used, in conjunction as, like, another word like folk filmmaking or truly independent filmmaking or whatever, but it is something that I think is really important to us, and I think we'll carry it with us, and I would encourage you to make more pure cinema movies. Maybe there's
Oh
one where you're
yeah.
talking to Joel Haver, or maybe there's one where you're talking to somebody else or whatever. But just keep this going because I really think this could be an important series.
Yeah, I do feel like carrying through everything that I do carry that feeling of what a pure cinema I think tries to invoke, which is to make something with intense focus and creation that doesn't always have to be perfect. It's not always exact, but it's a feeling. It's like it's not just vapor. It's like something you can actually touch. It's like fog or something like that. And I think like with this series, I do hope to make something that's tangible, something that we can look back at some point and see like there was something interesting there. There was something, and we won't know until it happens. So I'm gonna probably
Yeah.
get going, Cody. But this has been a great chat. Okay, man.
Absolutely. And it's the old thing of like the purpose of art is to stand naked on stage, like that old quote. I feel like the pure cinema has a certain nudity of like soul to it, and I think that's what keeps people coming back to our stuff for sure. They can feel it.
Yeah.
All right, man.
You
Great talking
you have
to
a good
you.
one. Okay. Bye
Take
bye.
care.
It's crazy how cinema can bring people together in a way that I don't feel like any other art form really does. It's just like an interesting feeling. Me and Cody have had our ups and our downs in our friendships. I think people know. I think he knows. We know it. I just am grateful for the friendship that we have. I'm grateful for the cinema that we've both made. I think Cody's made some great stuff. I feel I've made some great stuff. And as I sit here on this bed, recreating a shot from Cody's film Bed, I'm I'm awed by the connections that life brings you, the connections that we can never plan, or I don't, you can't force that. It just happens. And to be honest, I don't even remember how me and Cody met. I think we met somewhere through Twitter or something like that. But I do feel like he's definitely been one of the most important people in my life in terms of filmmaking. Even when we were not as close, not friends. Um, I know Cody was saying that there should be a twist in the a twist and I guess I wanted to keep this a secret, but I think that like I think Cody is one of those people that really has always inspired me to make myself better. I remember when me and him were not on good terms. I remember when I made my film One Shot, the film was inspired by me and him fighting. That was the story. I've never spoken about that publicly. Um, yeah, that film was about me and Cody and our friendship and wanting to move past the things that had broken it apart, you know? So it's kind of cool to see us making a film like this many years later, you know. And we're making films together and we're working on stuff, and you know, in the rough times and in the great times, we've both been, I feel like, iron sharpening iron. We're two gladiators, you know, always in perfecting our form. And that's something that I really admire about Cody. So I hope this comes off how it's intended to come off, which is supposed to be something that's to say that, like, you know, I appreciate you, Cody, and thanks for doing this project.